forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings. Welcome to a brand new episode of Bigger 10. I am Steve Dace, joined by my co-host, but never partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing all right. Ready to talk some football in the dead of winter. I noticed this week you conveniently left out the little incident. It's just time to talk about football, guys. The little incident at the end of the Michigan-Wisconsin game. I'm sure that was not intentional.
Well,
I know it was not intentional because you sent that out on Saturday.
Yeah, we scheduled these out for weeks, actually, a couple of weeks ago. But thank you for throwing me under the bus or under your coffin.
No problem.
Mr. Undead. Greatly appreciate that. I mean, we can address that. I thought all the penalties were appropriate. I do think the Wisconsin assistant who is seen on camera touching a couple of Michigan players and running his mouth probably should have gotten something. But beyond that, I thought it was a minimum that Juwan would get suspended for the rest of the regular season, and that is what he got. I mean, that's regardless of what happened before that moment, you just cannot do that. So, I mean, I thought the punishment was appropriate.
We had all of the typical, just terrible reactions to this, of course, that we've had to hear. Oh, should we do away with the handshake lines?
Yeah,
I love those conversations.
Yeah. Let's just remove anything that might cause somebody to not to demonstrate they're human and imperfect. How about we actually just set higher standards for people and demand they do better, and not because we had one of these incidents in thousands and hundreds of thousands of basketball games, that means that this now has to be done away with. You're right. That's an absolutely ridiculous take. But the good thing is we're here to talk some football because, hard as it is to believe, the defending Big Ten champs are opening up spring football this week, Aaron. Spring football starts this week. It'll be in full bloom at a lot of schools a week from now. We're past the NFL early entry deadline. We're past now both of the signing days. So I thought this week would be a great episode for us to unveil for the first time in 2022 my team total talent ratings for the upcoming season. And these will get updated several more times before we get to the final versions that will come out this summer when I publish my 2022 college football preview. But I thought this was a good time to do it. Why
Sure.
not, right?
Yeah, you bet.
So let's start by explaining how these work, because they're not a power rating, okay? These are not a power rating of teams. They are a potential rating of the talent on each roster. If you want a great power rating, I think Bill Connolly at ESPN does a great job. He measures returning production. But I also wanted to measure returning potential to complete the picture. What kind of talent is on the roster to fill holes, or if you should run into injury problems throughout the course of a year, for example. So here's how I calculate these. I use the sports or the composite recruiting rankings at 24/7 Sports of the three major recruiting services. That's 24/7, Rivals, and ESPN. We then give each player on the roster a point total based on the star they were assessed as a recruit. So 5 points for a 5-star, 4 points for a 4-star, etc. Okay. We only evaluate the last 4 recruiting classes. So for this year, that's 2019 to 2022. And that's just because fifth-year seniors at the Power 5 conference level are just not as impactful and plentiful as they used to be. But if a fifth-year senior or a COVID super seniors, we still have those again this year, if they figure prominently on the depth chart, they will still be accounted for. And to account for teams that we consider to be more, quote unquote, developmental, meaning they're not consistent top 10, 15, 20 recruiting programs. So they don't get a lot of the 4- and 5-star prospects. What we do is as their players overachieve, their incoming star rating they are given additional points. So players who underachieve, though, their star ratings are not lowered points, because the point of this exercise is to measure potential, and there could be mitigating circumstances beyond an overrated evaluation that has held a player back, like injuries. So we're trying to measure potential here, so you don't knock someone until their potential has been exhausted. Finally, these are updated with all roster news through February 19th, and I should note this. Most schools have not released fifth-year seniors / COVID super seniors that are returning yet, so those numbers are still to come. So look for some teams to take some pretty big leaps later on this year in the next few months when those numbers come out. But your thoughts, first of all, on the metric that I compiled. We started doing this actually in 2017 when we debuted Michigan Podcast in this channel. I think the very first episode were these team total talent ratings. So we've been at this now. This will be the 6th season we've used these. What's your thoughts on creating this as a metric to measure potential, to then go around, to then combine with returning production? And that to me is how you get a true power rating. Yes.
And I like the word rating more than ranking for this, because I feel like unlike some models out there, this is a lot less subjective. So ranking to me sounds, and I might have my definitions of words confused. Rankings to me are subjective. There's a lot more subjective than objective data. This is a combination of returning production, so hard data. This is a number of recruiting stars, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a data point, whether or not it's actually accurate to what they are. So to me, that screams more of a rating. And the reason why that is an important distinction is because at the end of the day, you can have all of your opinions that you want on teams, all of your feelings and all of your fans and pent-up emotions about what does the data actually say, especially this early in the season, or before the season, I should say. What does the data that we have available to us actually say about your team and what's coming back? And I appreciate this model because of that, because it's ranking, or a rating, I should say, as best you can, the hard data that you have available at in January and February. And the way, when we unveil these in a second, the way to look at this is you're looking for outliers, okay? That I would if I were combining Bill Connolly's measurement of returning production with my rankings of returning potential, I would weight them towards his ratings. I would rate it towards known quantities, right? Okay. But I wouldn't rate it 70% to 30, because you're dealing with a sport where we have guys come out of nowhere and win Heisman trophies almost every year. So instead, I would weight it though towards experience. But when you look at these, you're looking for outliers. You're looking for who's in a cycle up here. Right? I'm looking for rosters that clearly are a little bit higher than they would, that I think they typically or traditionally would be. And that would tell me, okay, this is a cycle up year for them. And now I go look at, a Bill Connolly rating to see, does that jive with his power, with his returning production to create a true power rating? And then you look for teams that are in cycle down years. Oh, wow, they lost a lot of guys. You see what I'm doing? See what I'm saying here? You're looking for outliers. Don't use this to create your top 25 poll. You use this, and I probably should have put this in the lead up that we just featured. But the best way to use these actually is for betting college football futures. How do we get ahead of the market? How do we know if a team is in a cycle up roster or a cycle down roster, so that we can make smart win futures or future bets in college football to get ahead of the market? That's the primary way I'd be looking at them. If I was going to do a top 25 poll, I'd like more of Bill Connolly's ratings than these. Sure. But if I want to look at who's a team that the market is overvaluing and undervaluing, and I want to get ahead of that market based on returning potential, that's what I think these do well, Aaron. Agreed. And the operative phrase that you just threw in there, getting ahead of the market, because we only have so much data that's available to us in January and February. Well, we have good ideas, but in the case of a lot of the middling teams at the top of the pack, they're going to be great. They're going to be vying for college football program or playoff. In the middle of the pack, though, who can make that jump from a 7.5 to 8.5 win season to a 10 win season? this is a metric system of metrics that helps us hopefully figure that out.
So let's get to it right now. These are the top 25 most talented rosters in college football, and you can see the point totals there. Every year I've done this, by the way, Alabama and Georgia have been 1 and 2. It's just a matter of who's been ranked where. Okay, so Georgia right now is a clear number 1. Alabama is a clear number 2. Texas A&M, largely bolstered by this class they just signed, is number 3. Michigan is number 4. Now, let me say this about Michigan because I'm the most familiar and have the most access to instant information about them. Their roster is the most identified in terms of fifth year and COVID year guys coming back. Okay. So I don't anticipate Michigan's roster will go up any higher than it is right now. I could, though, with guys transferring after spring, when you kind of realize where you're at on the roster, I could see it go down. It won't go down that far. It may not be number 4, but Michigan's a little bit ahead of the curve here early on because I'm just the most familiar with their roster compared to a lot of other teams that I got to wait for the school to confirm who's coming back and who's not because I don't have access to that kind of information. So I just wanted to state that. Clemson is 5 right now at 309, Texas at 306, Ohio State at 304. Remember, this would be heavily influenced by the year they had the changeover from Urban Meyer to Ryan Day that they did not for once have the number 1 recruiting class in the Big Ten. Oklahoma, which has cleaned up in the transfer portal with new coach Brett Venables, Penn State 294, and LSU, which has also been very aggressive in the transfer portal with Brian Kelly. Those are the top 10 rosters. You can see right now only 7 schools have 300 points or more, but expect that to change once we get more information about 5th year and 6th year guys. As for the rest, Oregon is the only. They're tied for 11th. That's the only Pac-12 team. I'm sorry, Stanford is in there. So those are the only 2 Pac-12 teams that are in the top 25 most talented rosters. Ole Miss, which has also been aggressive in the portal, which they needed to be because they lose a lot. They're 13th. Kentucky and Notre Dame are tied for 14th. Miami at 16, North Carolina 17. But look how close all these teams are, okay? I mean, we're talking 1 or 2 recruits away. Stanford is 18, Michigan State 19th, Mississippi State 20th. Florida State and Nebraska tied for 21, Arkansas and South Carolina out of the SEC at 23, and Virginia Tech at number 25. What stands out to you about those early numbers, Aaron?
Nothing really stands out in the top 10 or 11 there. You know, Texas is always going to have a talented roster and, you know, not finish 6th in the country despite having from this metric the 6th most talented team. I guess I should hold my tongue there. Maybe able to turn it around this year. The 2 teams that kind of stand out to me, one less than the other. Miami at number 16. They don't. Is it just me? They don't. Last year and every year it seems they get talked up, whether in recruiting or whether it's a star, some breakout candidate. And it just doesn't seem to me that they've been able to make the most of that. Stanford, though, is the one that stands out to me the most in this top 25. They've struggled, honestly. They've struggled the last few seasons, and to be able to string together a roster that's rated in the top 20, I think that's a little bit surprising to me. I guess Nebraska, you can throw them into for the same reason, but the rest of these are not overly eyebrow-raising.
So I'm glad you mentioned Stanford. I mean, not all scores are equal, right? Okay, I mean, Stanford's lost a couple of key skill position people that have transferred. I think they've ended up at USC, actually. But here's what this number tells me. So Stanford's win total last year was 4. If I get a win total of 5 or 6, what this kind of metric would tell you is you should play Stanford over the win total.
Yeah.
Okay? It doesn't say to go out there, though, and bet Stanford to win the Pac-12.
No.
That's where you got to take a closer look at the roster. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. But that's what that tells you. For example, look at Notre Dame. If you get a win total of like 9.5 with Notre Dame, this metric tells you to bet the under. Okay? That this is a cycle down year by their standards from a roster standpoint. So when you see an outlier team, because you're right, Stanford has struggled the last couple of seasons under David Shaw after being one of the more talented teams in the country for about a decade. this tells you, okay, this is the year that they're bringing a lot of guys back. And so maybe they are going to be more of a competitive team, and I want to get ahead of that market. That's what that kind of number would tell you. But
maybe Penn State as well, by that same logic,
maybe
struggled last year. Maybe they'll be a market overreaction. So
could very well see it because they've struggled the last 2 years. They're only 11-11, and think about that. Penn State is 11-11 in its last 2 seasons, in its last 22 games. So yeah, if you get a number of 7.5 or 8 with Penn State, you might want to consider playing the over. So there you go. Yeah, that's how you look at it. So let's get to the third topic here on this, and that is the balance here. There are currently 14 other rosters within 16 points of the top 25. And if you do the math, that's really only 4 to 6 players each roster, depending on where they're rated. So I think this just goes to show you how experience can make a huge difference once we add those 5th and 6th year super seniors, once they get added later. Your thoughts on that?
I think what this also tells you, I'm not sure if maybe deep is the right word, as I put earlier, but this year, is this an outlier year in terms of that number that you threw out there?
No, it's usually pretty close to that.
Okay.
Now, there may not be 14 of them. This is where the added, and this year it won't be as much of an impact because right now, and there's some talk that maybe they'll change the rules for one more year. But right now, you can take those 5th year and 6th year COVID senior guys, but you've still got to be at 85 scholarships.
Yep.
Last year, you didn't. Okay, so there will be an impact, just maybe not as much as possible because you're still dealing with a finite number of scholarships.
Yep.
But the last 2 years have been unique because of that added extra eligibility that maybe it hasn't been 14 teams, but it's still been like 8, 9, or 10.
Yeah. I think what this says is there is the possibility, at least, for parity between like the sixth and like 44th best teams. There's a possibility for parity.
Yeah.
Not always going to be a neck and neck game, but that's always good. You want more people, and that's going to continue to go that way in terms of expansion of the college football playoff, which is now further down the road than we thought before. But I'm not sure if it necessarily says it's deep, but parity, I think, is the word that comes to mind here.
Look no further than the 2 teams that are tied for 11th right now, Oregon and Florida.
Yeah.
They both have new coaches. Oregon's coach has never been a head coach before. Florida's coach is moving from the Sun Belt to the SEC. And so you've got to figure there might be a learning curve there, right? And so maybe you have rosters there that tell you those are 9 to 11 win teams. But maybe because of the changeover, chemistry, culture, maybe instead they're 7 to 9 win teams, right? So absolutely, those are some of the things that you're looking at as you look further on these teams, okay? All right, so let's get to where the Big Ten stands right now. Michigan has the most talented roster right now at 317, but I could see Ohio State either getting close to that or surpassing them once we get 5th and 6th year guys. I think you'll see Penn State move up a skosh. Michigan State, Nebraska, are next, 261 and 252. And then look at the rest of these numbers in the Big Ten West. This has been like this every year, though. Okay. Minnesota 244, Wisconsin 243, tied with Indiana, by the way. Maryland 238, Purdue 231, Iowa 224. Iowa had one of the least overall talented rosters in the Big Ten in my ratings last year, too. All they did was win the Big Ten West, so there you go. Rutgers at 218, and Illinois and Northwestern right now, they're tied for last at 196. But we start getting into 5th and 6th year COVID guys, I would expect you'll see teams like Iowa and Northwestern. I think you'll see them add some points. How many? I don't know.
You made a prediction earlier this year, right? Minnesota would win the Big Ten West.
Yeah, we made an early Michigan-Minnesota Big Ten championship game, yes.
Yeah, so, wow, that kind of surprises me, actually, that Minnesota, now it's by a point, has a better roster by this metric than Wisconsin does.
Well, they beat them last year, though, remember?
Right, but still, you don't expect Minnesota, at least with the recruiting classes that they've had, don't expect them to necessarily have that many points here. Nebraska, it's there for them. Just don't turn the ball over in crucial moments. The top 4, not a huge surprise. We'll see if Mel Tucker can avoid some of the same mistakes that his predecessor did in terms of recruiting classes. But it's kind of I don't want to say odd, but Michigan State has been able. Looks like let me look at they've been able to strengthen their roster actually year over year, despite all the tumult of the last couple of seasons. So
nobody hits the transfer portal harder than Mel
Yeah.
Tucker does. Yeah.
So that's kind of impressive. The rest of these are kind of fallen into place where you would think they would. Maryland, I mean, that's just disappointing. You think the recruiting that they have and
they have gotten destroyed by the transfer
Yeah.
portal. And they started out much higher. The last few weeks have
Yep.
been tough on them.
Yeah. So nothing stands out super, super shocking here.
So to put those numbers in perspective, these were my final Big Ten team total talent ratings heading into last season when we wrote our college football preview. All right, so Ohio State was first and way ahead. I mean, essentially an entire recruiting class ahead at 335. Michigan was at 295, and this goes to show I should have taken my own advice, right? So here's a team that wasn't getting rated in any preseason magazine, yet I had clearly the second most talented roster in the league with a win total of 7.5 or 8. But because I was very aware of what was going on within the program, the under was one of my best bets. If I did not know that, okay, if I did not have a knowledgeable fan bias and I just saw, pick another league. Oh, hey, so-and-so Acme State is the second most talented team in the ACC, and their win total is only 7.5.
Yep.
That's an automatic overbet, right? Well, those numbers told you last year that Michigan was an automatic overbet from a win total perspective. Penn State at 282. Indiana, you can see, really underperformed last year. Now, they had a ton of injuries, but Wisconsin, Maryland, Purdue, Minnesota, Michigan State, you can see how those teams are all very bunched up. Nebraska in there too. Illinois had a crap ton of super seniors last year. Iowa, Rutgers, and Northwestern. That order may not shock you, but you can see that the point totals are much higher because of all the COVID super seniors. Now, there will be more, and they've yet to be announced, but I don't think, for example, Northwestern's going to gain 30 points of roster points, which is the difference for them between where they ended up at the start of last season and where they are right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of scary for them at this point. Michigan State and Nebraska making strides in terms of where they line up in the Big Ten. From last year to this year, that's a surprise. Indiana, he's going to have to. Tom Allen's going to have to make a really great coaching job, I think, this year, because let's go back to that last slide. Kind of middle of the pack there. You had your shot kind of last year, you think.
Yeah.
So we'll see if he can turn that around. But going back to last year, not a whole lot of surprise except for really Iowa. You can maybe throw Illinois in there as well.
Now you can see why Illinois was one of my best bet win total overs. I thought they had too many points to only have a 3 win total.
Yep. So that's in Wisconsin on the other side of the equation. Vastly, it seemed like it doesn't help when you play Michigan, Notre Dame at all at the beginning of the
Penn
season,
State,
like they
the first
in
4
Penn
weeks.
State.
Yeah.
So other than that, not a whole heck of a lot of surprises here.
All right. Well, now we have our first marker down as we preview the 2022 rankings. Don't let the 21 there fool you on the screen. It's 22. We keep forgetting what year it is too. But when we come back, we will play our weekly game of Would You Rather here in a moment. Here we go. Time for our weekly game of Would You Rather here on Bigger Ten. Aaron and I will begin with you. Would you rather have the Big Ten drop ESPN in its new TV deal that it's negotiating right now altogether for NBC or CBS to partner with Fox? Fox will obviously remain. Or would you like them to remain with ESPN?
Drop them. Drop them like they're hot. Again, my position in this entire debacle, the gobbling up, seemingly, of large swaths of the college football landscape by SEC ESPN. My official position is maximum prejudice. It is make them feel pain as much as you possibly can, which is why I'm against expanding the playoff. I'm fine with keeping it like at 4 teams indefinitely. I know that's not going to happen, but I'm fine with that. One of these things is ESPN as well. There's still a lot of eyeballs in Big Ten country, guys. That's why the Big Ten Network exists. There's still a lot of eyeballs for big games. There's still a lot of people around the country who want to tune in for Michigan, Ohio State, or Michigan, Notre Dame, or Ohio State, fill in the blank, any of these major brands, there's still a lot of people who will tune into that. And so you would be cutting ESPN, I think, somewhat of a blow, and I just think it would also be cool to have CBS. What are they doing now? Mountain West and Sun Belt games? That's basically
they're
all.
losing the SEC.
Yeah.
Don't you want to hear that?
Yeah.
For Wisconsin coming into Kinnick for a night game. Don't you want to hear that
sure.
freaking theme music
That'd be great.
crank up? Hell yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
This one's for you. Would you rather watch a tournament in a down year for college basketball like it is this year, or watch a tournament where there are like 20 teams that could win it all?
Good question. I'm not so sure there's not 20 teams who could win it all, though, because it is a down year, as you just said, right? So here's my answer. 2020 taught me and reminded me that the NCAA tournament, as much as we love football here, it is my favorite singular sporting event in the country. So there is no such thing as a bad NCAA tournament. Whatever the format is, if it's the NCAA tournament, I'm in. That's my answer.
Got it.
All right, for you, would you rather the Big Ten be the only conference on CBS each week, or part of a doubleheader with Notre Dame on NBC? That's apparently NBC's plan. If that one offered us more money, which would you prefer?
CBS, hands down. Nothing against NBC. I mean, they do a pretty good job with Notre Dame's, but it's not the level of production quality I don't think that you get with CBS.
CBS's production quality has been the best my entire life. It's always been that way.
So that's a pretty easy proposition.
Again, don't you want to hear at the start?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you want your favorite team coming out of the tunnel? That CBS music, man. I freaking love that song. Yep.
Would you rather punch an opposing assistant coach or B-word slap an opposing assistant coach?
Oh, God.
I kind of like the female dog slap.
That is very well played. And frankly, if you look at Juwan, it's a little bit of both. It starts out like that, like this. It gets up here, and it's like that. And then it comes back down again, and it's like this. You see that on the replay? That's my favorite part of the whole thing, okay? I kind of think, I don't know, don't you think bitch slapping a guy might even be more demeaning in a way? Don't you?
Yeah,
as long as it's not like wimpy.
Oh, no,
you know?
No, the open hand, but you got to get the follow through in there.
But Juwan's like, then he gets up here, he's like, dude, you're not even worth a punch, man. I'm just going to slap you around, okay? Yeah. To me, that is, first of all, inexcusable behavior. Let us reiterate that, all right? But I think if you're going to do it like an aggressive bitch slap, that is more demeaning, I think, to another man than even a punch.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think you're really punking a dude with that. So I think, plus it doesn't damage your hand, right?
True.
So, all right, so I think I'll go with the latter. But that might be the best question that's ever been asked in the history of this segment. I had no idea it was coming, so well done. All right, we'll come back. We'll wrap it up with our Twitter poll results and our feedback of the week next. Here they are, the Twitter poll results. So there are 3 teams right now tied in the loss column for first place in the Big Ten with 2 weeks to go. A 4th team, Ohio State, is just a game back in the loss column. So we asked you guys, how many teams do you think are going to end up sharing the Big Ten basketball title? We're not even going to contemplate someone's going to win this thing outright. All right. 57.9% of you said 2. 30.6% of you said 3. 7.5% of you went for just outright chaos, and we love you for it. And the 3.9% of you said 4. So what do you think, Aaron? How many teams end up tying for the title?
You know, I actually think it's going to be 3. I could really see a scenario where it's 3. So I think Illinois, Purdue, who would be the 3rd one? Wisconsin, there you go.
So the 3 that are tied for first right now.
Yeah.
And if you look at their schedules, I could totally see that. Yeah, I think it will end up being 3. And we've had that a few times. You know, I remember in 2013, Michigan State, and Ohio State all tied for the title. I think we had a 3-way tie just a couple of years ago with Maryland, Michigan State, and who am I forgetting about? That was the COVID year.
Was that Michigan?
No, it wasn't us.
No, it wasn't. Yeah.
Because that was Juwan's first year. I can't remember who the 3rd team was.
Ohio State or something.
Might have been, yeah. But we've had that a few times. I think we're probably heading that way again this year. All right, feedback of the week from Jonathan Persons talking about Rutgers' situation. And he says they really need to figure out how to add win-loss ratio to the net rankings algorithm, because there's no way a 15-9 and 6-8 in a weaker Big East Conference Seton Hall should have a net rating of 34 when a 16-9, 10-5 team out of the superior Big Ten in Rutgers is only 81, especially when Seton Hall only has 2 wins over top 25 teams, while Rutgers has 6. Totally agree with that. Okay. To me, if your algorithm should reward outlier success more than it punishes outlier lack of success, because when you're selecting at-large teams to the NCAA tournament, the whole process is subjective, and the mission of the at-large teams is to select what do they say it is every year? The 38 best at-large teams in college basketball, right? That's what they say it is, right? Okay. Do I measure who the best is by what their best is or what their worst was? Well, if I'm measuring what their best is, I'm measuring it by what their best is. See what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
That there should be more weight given. I'm not saying to not penalize Rutgers for some inexplicably bad losses early in the year, but to punish them more for that. Is any team in college basketball going to do what they just did this year? The team that wins the damn NCAA tournament, they're going to win 4 straight games against top 20 teams? No, they're not. So to me, I think that the algorithm should be weighted more towards if we're gonna go too far overboard on outliers, then make it when a team is an outlier with their success, not when they're an outlier with their lack of success. That's what I would do.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And this is getting into mathematical stuff that is way beyond me, but you also have to figure out, and maybe the algorithm already does this, a 7-2 quad 1 Rutgers, I don't know what their record is in quad 1, but a 7-2 quad 1 record is going to be the same or a worse win percentage, I should say, than a 1-0 quad 1 record. So you got to figure out how to make all of those things even across the board, and I don't know how you do that. People who are a lot smarter than me have probably figured out how to do that.
Well, they won't. They won't show us the way that they can do this formula. It's proprietary, so we don't know really. We have a general idea that it includes Ken Palm like efficiency ratings and the RPI system, but we don't really know. What's being weighted here and what is not. I just know that if you're trying to tell us that a team that just beat 4 top 20 teams in a row is only this at the time, though, Rutgers lost to Purdue, and then somehow they dropped from 74 to 81. I don't understand that either. You're playing a top 10 team in the country on the road and you drop 7 spots. All right. But if you just beat 4 top 20 teams and you have a winning record, you're not the 71st best team in college basketball. And if my algorithm comes back with that as a result, then guess what? My algorithm is broken and needs to be fixed. I think that's the point we're trying to make here.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I would just add this. At the end of the day, the selection committee has to be able to make their own decisions. They have to see Rutgers is a lot better than what this algorithm is spitting out to us, which they do. It's still subjective.
All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger Ten. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Bigger10 to keep up to date on what we think about all things Big Ten in between episodes. Also, don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review, follow, whatever applies on wherever you watch, like YouTube right here, or listen, whether it's iTunes or elsewhere, to these episodes every time that we produce a new one, or here, or Michigan Podcast for that matter. We appreciate all of you helping us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. Until the next time, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. Till the next time, right here on Bigger Ten.